make a little video in honor of my turkeys. These are Bourbon Red Turkeys. They're an heritage type turkey. They're not your modern commercial type breeds. I've had Bourbon Red Turkeys for about 4 years. I think these young ones here are the second time that I've got them to breed successfully. I haven't had problems with Blackhead disease, which when you run turkeys and chickens together can be a problem. I've had problems with Coccidiosis, but my main issue with the turkeys is predators. They generally tend to be, as reputation says about them, not terribly bright birds. They tend to be very docile. If they were a four-legged animal, they would be like sheep. They can be herded around much like sheep, and they just seem to be very docile and not terribly clever. So the smaller ones get picked off pretty easily. The big ones never get picked off by anything. A turkey's a big bird. So this full-grown tom here is, I would guesstimate, he would probably dress out around 20 pounds. He might be 25 or 30 pounds. These aren't as big as your modern commercial birds, but for a heritage breed, they're pretty good size. I think they're beautiful birds, and I enjoy watching them. I enjoy the sounds they make and their behaviors. Turkeys are fun birds to have around, but I made the hard decision to sell off my turkeys, except for the ones that we're going to eat for Thanksgiving, which is coming up soon in another week or so. But the problem with the turkeys is that, number one, I'll post a video after this, they fight the chickens and to some extent the other poultry, and I am sure that there have been times in the last few years where they've outright killed some of my other poultry. I don't really care for that. It's the toms that do this. I don't really know why, because they don't try to mate with the chickens, and neither do the chickens try to mate with the turkeys, but they just seem to get in fights for no obvious reason. The other issue with turkeys is that you really cannot keep them contained. The fences here are 5 feet high. The big fat tom turkey here, even with both of his wings clipped completely, which currently his wings have grown back, but even with both wings completely clipped off, the primary and secondary feathers, he can easily clear the fence in a single jump, not even wing assisted. He can just jump from a standing start and clear the 5-foot fence. So you can't contain them, and they just go wherever they want. They aren't inclined to wander away per se, but if, say, you plant corn in an area and you don't want the turkeys to eat it, you can't fence them in somewhere. They have to be contained with a roof, or at very minimum a wire roof, and I'm really not interested in making a wire roof. So I've had to resort to just penning them up in pens in the barn or in some sheds. And it ends up being that half the year they're penned up to keep them from getting into seedlings or scratching up the garden. Turkeys do scratch like chickens. Possibly they don't scratch as much as chickens, but they're a huge bird, so the damage they do is pretty bad when they do decide to scratch. So the other issue is that they don't lay enough eggs to be worthwhile to keep for an egg-laying bird. And certainly they do make a lot of meat, there's no question about it. But, you know, it looks like I'm going to end up with 3 young turkeys that survived this year. And I set a lot more eggs than 3. I probably set at least a dozen eggs. And we hatched, I think, between 7 and 9. And the rest died from disease or predators. So, and that's pretty standard for turkeys. The losses are much greater than chickens or ducks. So that's not necessarily a good thing. The positive thing about turkeys is that once they are reasonable size, you can turn them onto a good pasture like this and feed them just on corn, and they do okay. And certainly they'll grow faster if you fed them on turkey feed, but they'll get by on insects, corn, and grass. But regardless, there's no way that it's economical for me to raise them. The only way that it makes sense, I think, for people to bother with the heritage turkeys is if you're selling eggs, chicks, breeding stock, or if you're selling dressed birds and you're raising them in quantity and selling dressed birds for the Thanksgiving market, which I've never had enough success raising them to do, and I'm not sure I'm not interested in even that whole process regardless. So Although I really enjoy the turkeys, this is going to be the last season for them, and I'll be somewhat sad to see them go, but they don't work out here that well. They're not a great fit, but do enjoy watching them. If I had money to burn and I was an old retired guy, I think I'd raise a lot of turkeys just for fun. I think of them as slightly more functional than, say, peafowl, but your chickens or your ducks are a lot more practical poultry to raise, on the whole. At least that's my opinion. But I will add too that I don't have an incubator, and I've never used an incubator, and all the birds here are hatched out with the mothers, or sometimes I'll set turkey eggs under a chicken or duck eggs under a goose or whatever, but they're all naturally hatched, and that's self-limiting. So that's turkeys. Pretty birds, not the most functional. Bourbon Red Turkeys.